My name is Ryan. I'm 32, and this happened a few months ago, but I still feel that weird punch in my stomach every time I think about it. Our anniversary was honestly one of the best days I'd had in a long time. I remember waking up already feeling good, because for once nothing fell off between us. We'd had a rough couple of months, stupid arguments, small things building up, but that day felt like a clean slate. She made breakfast before I even got out of the shower, which she never does unless something's really important to her. The whole apartment smelled like cinnamon and coffee, and I remember joking that I felt like I was in a commercial. She laughed in that soft way she does when she's actually happy, not trying to hide stress. We took the day off to spend it together, something we hadn't done since before things got tense. We went to this little lake about an hour from our place, the one we used to go to when we first started dating. It wasn't fancy or anything, just a spot where we'd sit by the water and talk about life. She held my hand almost the entire drive, which she used to do all the time, but kind of stopped lately. I remember thinking, maybe we're finally getting back to how we used to be. The weather was perfect, sunny but not hot, and the lake was almost empty, which made it feel like our own place. We walked around like we did before work, and stress made us boring. She kept leaning into me, and I kept joking she was just cold, even though it was warm. Around noon, she said she had something for me, and she seemed oddly nervous. Not bad nervous, just like she really hoped I'd like it. She handed me this small wrapped box, nothing big, just simple and neat. Inside was a silver bracelet with this tiny engraved compass charm. She said it was because I always help us find our way back. It was cheesy, but it actually hit me hard because it felt exactly like something she'd say back when everything was good. I hugged her, and she hugged me back tighter than she had in months. I genuinely thought, we're okay again. I didn't know yet that the bracelet wasn't meant for me. I had no idea the worst part of our relationship was about to show itself out of nowhere. We spent the rest of the afternoon by the water, and everything felt easy, like we weren't forcing anything for the first time in a while. She kept touching the bracelet on my wrist, almost like she was proud of it. I noticed she'd get quiet sometimes, but not in a bad way, just thoughtful. I figured she was emotional because we'd finally had a good day. She even suggested grabbing dinner at the diner near our apartment, which she usually avoids because she says it's too greasy. It's my favorite place, though, and the fact that she picked it made me feel seen. I swear I spent half the day thinking about how stupid I was for stressing about our relationship. I actually started planning in my head how to make things better between us long term. We talked about random stuff like we used to, dumb movies, weird coworkers, small inside jokes. She laughed so hard at one point she snorted, and I remember thinking, I missed this version of her. On the drive back home, she squeezed my hand again, and it made me feel like things were healing. I didn't see a single red flag, not one. And looking back, that might be why the next morning hit so hard. Because that night, I went to sleep feeling like the luckiest guy ever. I kept looking at the bracelet before bed, thinking it actually meant something deep. Like she still believed in us, you know? I even texted my brother saying the anniversary went way better than expected. She fell asleep on my chest, which she hadn't done in months. Everything felt right in a way that made me calm for the first time in forever. I didn't know that the universe was basically loading the jump scare in the background. Because the next day, something small, stupid small, cracked the whole illusion. And once I pulled that first thread, everything unraveled. And honestly, I wish I had never pulled it. The morning after, she left early for a dentist appointment. I was still riding the high from the day before, so I decided to clean the place a bit as a surprise. I was picking up clothes from the chair in our room when I saw the little gift bag she'd used for the bracelet. The tag was still inside, just tucked behind the tissue paper. I wasn't snooping, it literally fell out when I lifted the bag. The tag had her handwriting on it, but it wasn't the message she told me she wrote. This one said something completely different. It said, "You deserve this. Always. L." My name doesn't start with L. I just stared at it for a second, thinking maybe she saved an old tag from something else. But the bag still smelled like the shop she bought the bracelet from. And the handwriting was fresh, like it was written recently. My heart dropped in this slow, stupid way, like my brain was trying to pretend it wasn't real. I checked the receipt inside the bag, and that's when things got worse. It showed 2 items purchased, 2 bracelets. One had the same charm as mine. The other one had initials engraved, but not mine. The initials were JC. I don't know a single person in her life with those initials. But she does. Her coworker. The one she always said was just a friend. The one she stopped mentioning out of nowhere months ago. The one she used to talk about all the time before things got weird between us. I remember sitting on the floor just staring at the receipt, like it was evidence in a case against me. My stomach felt cold. My hands were shaking, even though nothing was technically happening. It was just paper, but it felt like someone had ripped open my chest. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was for a family member. Maybe it was for someone retiring. Maybe I was being paranoid. But the initials wouldn't leave my head. And the note definitely wasn't meant for me. So I grabbed my phone and went through our messages, something I hadn't done in months. Not because I'm morally above it, but because I genuinely trusted her. There wasn't anything directly suspicious, but the gaps were the problem. Entire afternoons with no messages. Late nights, working on a project. Group photos at her office events where she stood far from me, but weirdly close to him. I kept trying to talk myself down, but the bracelet on my wrist felt heavier by the second. I ended up checking her Instagram, which she barely posts on. But I remembered the bracelet store has those tagged photos clients post. So I searched the store's location. And right there, 2 days before our anniversary, was a picture of her coworker holding a gift bag from the same shop. Same bag. Same tissue paper. I swear my blood ran cold. I clicked the picture, and in the caption he wrote, "Didn't expect this today." No tag from her, obviously, but the timing was too close to deny. I just sat there on the couch staring at the screen like an idiot. That's when something inside me just shut off. Not anger. Not sadness. Just nothing. When she got home, she acted completely normal, which honestly made it worse. She kissed me, asked if I wanted coffee, talked about her appointment. I just kept looking at her trying to see if anything in her face looked different, like guilt or hesitation or something. But she looked the same as always, like the girl I spent years building a life with. I didn't bring it up right away. I wanted to hear how she'd act when she didn't know I knew. She kept brushing past me, touching my arm, acting close. I think that part is what messed me up the most. She seemed genuinely happy with me. Not fake. Not forced. Like yesterday really meant something to her. And that confused the hell out of me. How do you act so warm towards someone if you're giving the same gift to another guy? How do you smile at me like that while he's posting pictures with the same damn bag? At one point she noticed I wasn't talking much and asked if I was tired. I said yeah, but inside I felt like I'd swallowed a rock. I didn't confront her that day. I didn't confront her the next day either. Because every time I tried to rehearse the words, something in me froze. I wasn't ready to hear whatever truth was waiting behind that note with someone else's initials. And even now, months later, I still don't know if I'll ever actually ask her. Maybe I don't want the real answer. Maybe the silence is easier than whatever reality is hiding behind that bracelet. The day after that was when everything really started eating at me. I went to work pretending everything was fine, but my brain kept looping the note and the receipt. Every meeting felt like noise, like people were talking through water. I kept glancing at the bracelet like it was some kind of joke I didn't get yet. At lunch, I ended up sitting in my car instead of eating with my coworkers. I pulled out the bag again just to stare at the tag, almost like I hoped the handwriting would magically change. It didn't. She wrote that message for someone else, and she didn't even bother making a new tag for mine. That detail burned more than anything. It was so lazy, so careless. It made me wonder how long I'd been the background character in whatever story she was writing with him. I thought about calling my brother to vent, but I couldn't even say the words out loud. Once you say it, it becomes real. And I still wasn't ready for real. I started imagining every random moment from the past year through a different lens. Every late night. Every canceled plan. Every time she came home smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. I used to brush those things off as paranoia. Now they felt like puzzle pieces I'd ignored. I sat in that car for almost an hour, bracelet digging into my wrist, stomach in knots. By the time my break was over, I realized something. I didn't trust her at all anymore. And the worst part was she didn't even know it. That night, she cooked dinner and acted like nothing was wrong, humming to herself while chopping vegetables. It made my skin crawl that she looked so peaceful, not because I wanted her to suffer, but because I felt like I was living in two realities at once. The version where she loved me and the version where she was giving another man the same gift she gave me. We sat on the couch afterward and watched some show she likes, and I couldn't focus on a single scene. She leaned against me like she always did, and I felt myself stiffen without meaning to. She noticed, shifted a little, looked up at me, then looked back at the TV. I could tell she felt that something was off, but she didn't ask. Maybe she didn't want to know. Or maybe she thought it was just another normal mood swing. At one point, she touched the bracelet again and said she was glad I liked it. My stomach flipped so hard I thought I might be sick. I managed to smile, but it felt like holding a cracked mask on my face. I kept waiting for some slip-up, something that would force the truth out. But she stayed calm, gentle, affectionate, like she was trying. And that made it even more confusing. If she was cheating, why did this comfort seem so real? Why did she look at me with those soft eyes I used to trust? I kept searching her face for guilt, but I didn't see it. I didn't see anything that confirmed or denied anything. It was all just this weird emotional limbo where everything meant something and nothing at the same time. By the end of the night, I felt exhausted from pretending, but she went to bed happy, and I stayed awake staring at the ceiling, wondering when everything had stopped making sense. I finally cracked a few days later when I was doing laundry. One of her sweaters had the same faint cologne smell I'd picked up before, and my chest tightened again. I sat on the floor with a pile of clothes around me, feeling ridiculous and pathetic. This wasn't who I was. I used to be solid, steady, grounded. Now I felt like some paranoid version of myself I didn't recognize. I grabbed her sweater and just held it for a second, breathing in that smell and hating myself for doing it. I wished it didn't matter. I wished I could pretend the bracelet mix-up was innocent. But my brain kept replaying the initials on the receipt and the bag in his Instagram post. I checked her location on my phone out of desperation, even though I knew how wrong that was. She was at work, like she said. But the lack of drama didn't make me feel better. If anything, it made everything feel more twisted. Like she was living two versions of her life flawlessly. And I was the only one drowning in the overlap. I sat there on the laundry room floor for probably half an hour, just trying to breathe normally. A part of me wanted to storm into her job and demand answers. Another part of me wanted to pack a bag and disappear. But the biggest part wanted none of it to be true. I wanted our anniversary to stay what it felt like, real, warm, hopeful. But I couldn't unknow what I knew. The bracelet wasn't meant for me. And every time I touched it, it felt less like a gift and more like evidence. The breaking point wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a fight or a confession or anything you'd expect. It happened one morning while she was brushing her teeth. I walked past her on the way to grab my keys, and I saw the bracelet she'd given me sitting on the dresser, not on my wrist. Not because I'd taken it off intentionally, but because I realized I didn't want to wear it anymore. It felt wrong. It felt like wearing a lie. She noticed it too when she came out of the bathroom. Her eyes went straight to it, then to me, then back to it. She opened her mouth like she wanted to ask something, but then closed it again. She just walked over, picked it up gently, and held it in her hand. She looked confused, like she couldn't figure out why seeing it there bothered her. She asked if something was wrong, but her voice was too light, like she didn't want the real answer. I said I just forgot to put it on. She nodded, but we both knew I was lying. It was one of those moments where the truth sits between two people like a wall neither wants to touch. She kissed me goodbye that morning, and it felt different. Not colder, just off. Like she felt something she didn't know how to name. And I left for work feeling like the ground under our relationship had completely shifted. The weirdest part came later that same week. She came home looking tired, the kind of tired that isn't about work. She sat on the couch in silence for a long time, like something heavy was sitting on her chest. I didn't say anything. I didn't trust myself to. Then she looked at me, really looked at me, and for a moment I thought she was about to confess everything. Her eyes were watery, but she wasn't crying, just overwhelmed. She opened her mouth, closed it, and looked down at her hands. She said she'd had a strange day, but didn't explain. Then she asked if I was happy with us. The question came out of nowhere, like she'd been holding it in for days. I froze because I didn't know the answer anymore. I told her I was tired, and we could talk later. She nodded slowly, like she already expected that. Then she went to shower, and I stayed in the living room staring at the same bracelet lying on the coffee table. I kept expecting something to happen that would clarify everything. Some slip-up, some clue, some accident. But nothing came. Instead, everything just got heavier in a quiet way, like the air between us had changed density. We didn't fight. We didn't make up. We didn't talk about the bracelet. It was like the universe hit pause on our relationship and never pressed play again. And to this day, I still don't know what she was going to say that night, or if it had anything to do with the other bracelet. All I know is that everything shifted, and then just stayed there, frozen, unanswered. After that night, things between us settled into this strange quiet that didn't feel like peace at all. It was the kind of quiet you get before a storm, when even small sounds feel too loud. She started leaving earlier for work, saying she had extra tasks to finish. I didn't question it, but I watched her closely, noticing the way she avoided eye contact more than usual. On my side, I tried to act normal, but everything felt forced. Every laugh, every kiss, every casual conversation. It all felt like a performance we were both pretending not to notice. Sometimes she'd reach for my hand, then pull her own back halfway like she thought better of it. Other times she'd try to be extra affectionate, but it came out awkward, like she was trying to fix a leak with tape that wouldn't stick. I kept telling myself I should just confront her and get it over with. Rip the Band-Aid off, and in this weird limbo both of us were drowning in. But every time I imagined saying the words out loud, who was the other bracelet for? My throat tightened. I didn't want the answer. I didn't want to hear a name, or a confession, or worse, a calm explanation. Because any version of the truth would change everything. One day, she sent me a picture during her lunch break of some new coffee place her coworker took her to. She didn't mention which coworker, but I felt my stomach drop anyway. It wasn't even the picture. It was the way she didn't smile with her eyes like she normally does. She looked distracted, somewhere else in her head. And I knew that whatever was going on, it wasn't just about a bracelet. Something deeper was pulling her away from me, even if she didn't say it. And I felt myself starting to pull away too, without meaning to. It was like both of us were slowly backing out of the room without noticing our feet. About a week later, I decided to take a walk after work just to clear my head. I ended up wandering through a part of downtown we used to go to when we first started dating. There was this bookstore cafe she loved, and for some reason, I walked past it even though it wasn't on my route home. When I looked through the window, I saw a couple sitting on the couch in the back, the same couch we used to sit on. For a second, my heart jumped because the girl had the same hair as her from behind. I actually froze on the sidewalk. But when she turned her head, it wasn't her. Still, that moment hit harder than I expected. It made me realize how much I'd been carrying around in silence. How every stranger, every object, every place started reminding me of the bracelet and that stupid note. I kept walking and eventually ended up sitting on a bench by the river, watching people pass by while my brain replayed everything in loops. It felt like I'd aged years in just a couple of weeks. I thought about the version of us that used to be simple and easy. The us that didn't second-guess every small thing. The us that didn't have secrets sitting between us like furniture we couldn't move. I found myself wondering something I never thought I would. Were we even compatible anymore? Not because of some dramatic betrayal, but because we'd both changed without realizing it. Maybe the bracelet situation was just the crack that revealed everything else. Maybe we were already drifting long before that. The idea scared me more than the possibility of cheating did. Because you can fight a betrayal, but how do you fight two people outgrowing each other quietly? I sat there for a long time before heading home, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to walk through that door. When I finally got home, she was sitting on the floor folding laundry, something she never does unless she's stressed. She looked up when I walked in, gave me this small smile that didn't reach her eyes, and asked how my day was. I told her it was fine, which was becoming my default lie. She nodded like she expected that answer, then went back to folding. There was something different about her posture. Tense shoulders, fast hands, like she was trying to keep herself busy to avoid thinking. She asked if I wanted to watch a movie later, but her voice cracked just slightly. She tried to cover it with a cough, but I caught it. She knew something was off with me. She just didn't know what. Or maybe she did. Maybe she could feel the shift the same way I could. We moved around each other like magnets flipped to the wrong side. Always close, but never connecting. At one point, she accidentally knocked the bracelet off the coffee table with her elbow. It hit the floor with a sharp metallic sound that made both of us flinch. She froze for a second, staring at it like it meant something she couldn't say out loud. I picked it up before she could and set it back on the table. She thanked me quietly, but her voice sounded small. Then she said she was going to take a long bath. I watched her walk away and felt this weird ache I couldn't name. It wasn't anger or betrayal anymore. It was something closer to grief. Like we were losing something neither of us knew how to save. Later that night, I couldn't sleep, so I went to the living room to get some water. The lights were off, but I noticed her phone on the couch, screen facing up. A notification had popped up. I didn't touch it. I didn't flip it over. I didn't read anything. I just stared at the glow on the screen like it was some portal to answers I wasn't ready for. I knew that if I picked it up and looked through it, everything would change. Good or bad. Nothing would be the same after that. My hand actually hovered above it for a second. But then something inside me stopped. Not out of moral high ground, but because I realized I wasn't sure I wanted to know the truth anymore. The unknown felt safer than the confirmation. So I turned around and went back to bed without touching it. She shifted slightly when I got under the covers, but didn't wake up. I watched her for a moment, wondering how we got here. Two people who used to tell each other everything now lying side by side like strangers wearing familiar faces. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe, but everything felt tight and heavy. It reminded me of that feeling right before a panic attack, when your mind is louder than your heartbeat. By morning, she acted like nothing happened. Maybe nothing did. Maybe I imagined half of the tension, but the bracelet was still lying on the table where I left it, and its presence said everything we weren't saying out loud. A silent reminder of a secret neither of us knew how to confront. A few days later, something strange happened that I still can't explain. I came home early from work because a meeting got canceled, and I didn't tell her. When I opened the door, I heard her talking softly in the bedroom. Not laughing, not whispering, just talking in this low, tired voice. At first I thought she was on the phone, but when I stepped closer, I realized there was no pause, no response from anyone else. She was talking to herself, talking like she was practicing something. I stood by the hallway, completely still, listening to her say things like, "You have to be honest, and he deserves the truth, and just say it." My chest tightened because it sounded like she was preparing to tell me everything. But I didn't walk in. I couldn't. Something about the tone in her voice made me freeze. Not because it sounded guilty, but because it sounded scared. I backed away quietly and pretended I had just gotten home, making noise with my keys before walking in normally. She came out of the bedroom quickly, eyes a little red, but she acted casual. Too casual. She asked how work was, and I said the same thing I always said, "Fine." She nodded like she knew I was lying again, and I looked at her wondering if she was lying too. That night, we made dinner together, but everything between us felt stretched thin, like the air itself was about to snap. And the worst part is neither of us said a word about what we both knew was sitting right there between us. The bracelet stayed on the counter the entire time, untouched, like it belonged to someone else's life, not ours. By the time the weekend came around, I felt like we were living inside some kind of emotional fog. Everything looked normal from the outside, but nothing felt normal on the inside. We spent most of Saturday in different rooms, not because we were fighting, but because we didn't know how to be around each other anymore. She spent hours cleaning the kitchen, which she never does unless she's avoiding something. I tried fixing things that weren't broken just to keep my hands busy. At one point, she walked into the living room and just stood there like she wanted to say something. Her eyes flicked to the bracelet on the shelf, then to me, then away again. She opened her mouth, closed it, and left the room. I felt this weird sinking feeling in my stomach, like I was waiting for a verdict I never asked for. Later, when we sat down for dinner, the silence was so heavy it felt physical. She pushed her food around her plate without eating much. I asked if she was okay, and she said she was just tired. The tired answer had become her version of my fine, a way to avoid honesty without technically lying. After dinner, she went to bed early, leaving me alone at the table staring at the empty seat across from me. I felt like we were shadows of ourselves, stuck replaying old routines without the connection that used to hold them together. The house felt too quiet, too still. Even the air felt wrong, like it wasn't moving. I kept looking at that bracelet, the damn charm catching the light every so often like it was mocking me. It felt like the centerpiece of our downfall, even though it was just a piece of metal. And I knew then that something between us had already broken. We just hadn't admitted it yet. Sunday was the day everything hit its peak. I woke up early and found her already sitting on the couch, staring at the TV without actually watching it. She looked exhausted in a way I'd never seen before, like she hadn't slept at all. When she noticed me, she gave this small, shaky smile that disappeared almost instantly. I sat beside her, not touching her, not saying anything. We just sat there in this weird, heavy silence that stretched on and on. Eventually, she whispered my name, and something in her voice made my chest tighten. She sounded like someone about to confess a crime. But before she could say anything else, Her phone buzzed on the table. She froze. I froze. The screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize at first, but the initials were the same. JC. Her eyes flicked to mine for a split second, and in that moment, everything inside me dropped. Not because I had confirmation, but because of the look on her face. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear of getting caught. It was something else, like panic mixed with sadness. She grabbed the phone, turned it face down, and stood up like the couch was burning. I opened my mouth to say something, but nothing came out. It felt like all the oxygen in the room had disappeared. She walked to the bedroom and closed the door quietly. No yelling, no excuses, just a quiet door, and me sitting there staring at the spot where her phone had buzzed, wondering if the truth was finally about to spill out or if it would stay buried forever. I waited. I honestly thought she was going to come back out with an explanation, any explanation. The seconds turned into minutes, and the minutes felt like hours. I could hear faint movement in the room, like she was pacing or sitting on the edge of the bed. Part of me wanted to walk in there and finally ask everything I'd been holding back. But another part of me stayed frozen on that couch, afraid of the answers waiting behind that door. Eventually, the apartment got so quiet it felt unreal. The kind of quiet where even the refrigerator hum sounded too loud. When she finally came out, she looked pale, her eyes a little red, but her face was calm. Too calm. She sat across from me, hands in her lap, but she didn't speak. I didn't either. We just stared at each other like two people waiting for the other to break first. Then, out of nowhere, she whispered, "I'm sorry." Just that. 2 words. No explanation. No confession. No context. I waited for more, but nothing came. She stood up slowly and went to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of water. I watched her hands shake as she held the cup. I should have asked what she meant. I should have demanded answers. But I didn't. Something in me shut down completely, and the moment passed without either of us grabbing it. The next day felt strangely normal, like the universe had erased whatever almost happened. She acted like the morning before never existed. She made coffee, talked about work, kissed my cheek before leaving. For a second, I thought maybe she was going to finally address everything later. But she didn't. The day went by, and nothing happened. Then another day. Then another. Things didn't get better, but they didn't explode either. It was like the whole situation froze in time. She never mentioned JC. She never mentioned the note. She never mentioned the bracelet. And I never asked. We kept living together like two people renting the same emotional space, but never stepping into each other's rooms. I tried bringing up deeper conversations a couple of times, but she'd always redirect or say she was tired. Eventually, I stopped trying. And the weirdest part is that life just went on. We went to work, ate dinner, paid bills, watched shows. Like nothing ever happened. Like the bracelet didn't exist. Like that morning with her whispering, "I'm sorry," never happened. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me like she wanted to say something important. But she never did. And I never pushed. It was like whatever truth had been hiding between us decided to stay hidden for good. To this day, I still don't know the full story. I don't know who JC really was to her. I don't know if the bracelet was meant for him, or if the note was some leftover thing, or if she was going through something she never told me about. We stayed together for a while after that, living in that strange half-relationship where everything looks normal from the outside but feels hollow inside. Eventually, we broke up quietly. No big fight, no dramatic ending. Just two people drifting apart until there was nothing left to hold on to. I packed my stuff, she packed hers, and we both pretended it didn't hurt. But the bracelet never left my mind. Not because of what it might have meant, but because of what it did to us without a single word being spoken. One object, one receipt, one note written for someone else. And somehow it changed the entire course of our relationship. Sometimes I still wonder what she was going to say that morning when JC's name lit up her phone. Sometimes I wonder if the truth would have made things better or worse. But I'll never know. The moment passed. The answers never came. And everything that started on what I thought was the best anniversary we'd had ended in silence. Just silence. And that's honestly the part that still sticks with me. The way it all just stopped without any real explanation. Like something unfinished that I'll never fully understand.